it's my pleasure to keep this show rolling by introducing the folks that are going to fill these chairs up here. Yes, all right. First and foremost, Dr. Jason Hanley, our Vice President of Education and Visitor Engagement.
Hey, thank you, Greg.
All right. And then a name that's going to be familiar to all of you that have been cheering all along, and a guy that doesn't even need a last name, Phil X on guitar. That's true. All right. Everett Bradley percussion. Everett. And background vocals and many other things too. Welcome. You know, this crew is coming to us direct from Nashville, where they opened JBJ's Club on Broadway last night. And fired off 6 songs to the delight and surprise of the audience, yes. So joining us next is John Shanks on guitar. Yeah, we need to hand him a diploma now. All right, and then on bass, Hugh McDonald. Basically. And then the hitman, Tico Torres on drums, huh? There we go. And of course, on keyboards from the beginning, David Bryan. You did win something, David. David, you did win something. Your name is on a plaque in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on the floor below. And of course, we have one empty seat. And that empty seat is for none other than John Bon Jovi. We all stand for you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you, baby. Nice to be back in Cleveland. Very nice to be back.
Nice weather here, too.
Yeah, not bad, right?
You've been here when it's cold.
Guys, thank you so much for being here today. This is really a special moment for all of us. Getting to bring you to see the exhibit that we just opened and flying you in, as Greg said, from Nashville. In fact, what an incredible year you guys are having as a band. I mean, it's really thinking back to that legacy between the Hulu special, the new album, Bon Jovi Forever, which is fantastic. In fact, a lot of the folks in the crowd here got to hear it in this theater yesterday, right when it released. Oh, there they are. Very nice. And, looking back on a band that has been around for 40 years, it's pretty incredible, to think back on that legacy. Obviously, in the time we have today, we're not going to go through every single song and every history. I know, I would want to do it too. But I want to think about some sort of themes we can walk through and some of what's made Bon Jovi one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time. I mean, you guys are at the top of the list. But let's start with last night. You opened the club down there in Nashville, JBJ's. And I was just saying to Matt, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first time publicly you guys all got back on stage together since the surgery,
with
right?
the Grammy Person of the Year
Right.
awards, but the first time that we really performed and was at JBJ's last night. Yeah, it was fun. It was good to be back on stage.
We're glad to have you back on stage, in fact.
Thank you. We had
What-
a good time.
What did that feel like for you guys to be back out there rocking it out?
Really fun. You know, that was the last place we played on the last tour.
Yeah,
And
right.
then the first place we played now. So it's
In fact, I think that's in the
pretty
Hulu
excellent.
doc, right? That the Nashville show's the last one you guys played when you ended the tour.
Yeah.
so it was I was there too.
A bunch of people were there. I think this is what everything we mentioned, somebody in the audience is going to have participated at some point. This is the Uber fans out here today.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Well, when I think back to a band like you guys that have had an incredible 40 years and still going strong, you think of the elements of what kind of makes that. And for me, I always go back to the songs. That's sort of the heart and soul of the music that's out there. It's what connects with the audience. And John, I know you've talked, in interviews in the past too, that those songs, come from the heart. They come from what you're thinking about, what you're doing. But talk a little bit about that process now of 40 years of incredible songs you put out, and sort of how does that process work for you? From the things you've talked about in the past, I assume a lot of that might be lyrics, but sometimes is it a melody? Where do those songs come from?
All the above. I mean, some days it's a lyric, some days it's a title, sometimes it's a feel. But there's been an evolution. If I look back on the very first record or even the second record, there was an idea of who you would become as a voice, as a songwriter. But the evolution happened, and the beautiful thing is so many of you have been on this ride with us for this 40 years, and some people had gotten on at the very beginning and may have gotten off along the way because life gets in the way, and you're not as focused on your favorite band's rock record any longer, right? So, I'll run into people that, in all honesty, will say, "Oh, I listened to Slippery When Wet in New Jersey," and I say, "And there was 14 other albums." And I know, I can guarantee that there will be a generation of kid because of the documentary and because of the hits on this record, they're going to find us for the first time. So, I get all of that. And the beautiful thing is that music will live forever, especially in this day and age with streaming. Boys and girls out there are finding music for the first time by pressing a button.
Totally, right?
Everything in history is available to you on those streaming services. So they don't know what period in time a song comes from. They just hear a song. You see? So it's fortunate for us that we've had all these albums and this evolution has happened and this song still means something to everybody so that we're able to still have, the opportunity to present them.
Yeah. And John, for you, throughout the career again too, you're the primary songwriter, but you've often worked with a lot of other people to
Sure.
kind of help you hone that craft. And some of them are on the stage, David,
Yep.
John Shanks here, and a
Yep.
bunch of the guys, and even other writers too. You think of Desmond Child that you've worked with many times over the years, Billy Falcon, who's co-writing on the new record, or Richie in the beginning years. What was that process like for you, kind of working with someone else? It's clear that you enjoy that process, maybe of refining a song with another person.
Sure, there's never any ego involved. I mean, the idea is that you just want to get the best end result. So sometimes, there's a certain subject matter that I just feel that I'm not looking for any, input on, and others that are going to benefit as a result. But it's each and every one is just a give and a take. Even if you're, writing it by yourself, it's always going to be give and take with yourself. And then if there's two writers or sometimes three writers in a room, it's, what do you got? What do you got? No, I don't like that. I like that. And so we just go round and round. It's all wonderful. It really is. The collaborative effort is great.
How about someone like Desmond Child, who's come back with you time and time again?
It's been many years,
Yeah.
but in the formative years, it was beneficial to both of us, really, and he's a sweetheart of a guy.
And then what about Billy Falcon, who you brought back on the new record too?
He's a great friend, a brilliant songwriter, and somebody that I used to admire his records back in the latter 70s, and then found him and worked on a couple records for him. And then, maybe 25 years ago, I wrote a song with him for the first time.
Yeah. So then once you've got the song, you got to get it in the studio, right? And you guys have worked, again, in many studios and many ways of getting the songs captured. And for me, I kept thinking back to some of the producers that you've had over the years. And now the new record, John Shanks and John Bon Jovi produced it themselves, and it's amazing sound on there. We'll come back to that in a minute. But early on, I was thinking particularly of Bruce, right? Bruce Fabian. Fairbairn, right? The sound that he got for you, that was the sort of, for me, as the fan who bought the record in '86, Slippery When Wet, and got turned on to you, that sound, he kind of helped you find that maybe metal edge that was popular at the time. But man, your songs were still, they could have been Springsteen-style songs. They could have been anything you wanted them to. So what was that early period like of Slippery When Wet, kind of finding a sound with the band of what you were going to be?
We did a lot of pre-production for that, and part of that was working out parts. And the great thing about Bruce, he was a trumpet player, he was a musician, and he took us to a place where we were by ourselves. We didn't do it close to our homes. So, and there was the room. Bob Rock was the engineer.
Yeah.
And an incredible room that had a loading bay next to the recording, the big recording room. And they'd open the doors, put mics out there, and that, oddly enough, got this unique sound that we'd never, and big sound, on not only the instruments, but the drums. And that process, plus we were in a place, the songs were all there, and it was just amazing. It was probably one of the easiest records we ever did.
Wow. And
this would have to be a close second, is Forever.
Yeah, Bob Rock was really instrumental in that, in the sounds and engineering. I mean, he was like he's a sound genius and parts, and he was very instrumental in that, really.
yeah, that album still sounds massive today, right? You go back and listen to Slippery When Wet, it's just an incredible sounding record. And I think the songs hold up past just the original recording, obviously, but there's something that you can't help but listen to, the Living on a Prayer or Wanted Dead or Alive. They grab you immediately from there. And Tico, your drums, I mean, again, they stand out. Like, you can hear the power behind all your drumming on every Bon Jovi song. What's that like, particularly now, you and you working together as the kind of rhythm section to create the sound of Bon Jovi?
It's bread and butter.
Forever.
Bread and butter.
I was going to say that Fairbairn and Bob Rock just let us do what we do.
Yeah.
And they gently would massage until, before we even got in the studio, when we were just doing the demos, that's one of the reasons why it came out so great.
Can any of you guys ever think of a moment where maybe, John, a song wasn't working that you had, and then you got into the studio? Was there ever a moment where the studio itself kind of helped you find a way into it, or the combination of the band and being there with the rest of the band playing help you find the song?
Many times over the years, a song is written one way and becomes much more of a band song when the collective we make it what it ends up to be. One example would be Living on a Prayer. When we wrote it, the three of us write it in a room together. We were all like, it's good, it's complete, we know what it is. But it's when we went into pre-production and worked hard on that bass line and then went in and Tico put a beat behind it, but then in that big room, it became what it is today. So yeah, it's happened many times over the years.
I've heard you talk about like those early days when you were working at the power station in New York, and sort of the ability you saw all these other great artists coming in when you were working there. And it seems like you often go back to that moment as maybe a sonic touchstone for yourself, because I've even heard you talk about other studios and say, yeah, we're trying to get that kind of early power station vibe. Is that something that still sticks in your head?
No, that's not true.
Yeah?
No. I don't mean to contradict you,
No,
but
well, you would know better than me, to be fair.
Just did.
when we went to Little Mountain, for example, that was known as a jingle studio before we went there. And that's all it really was. But in 1986, when I heard Bruce Fairbairn do a little band from, I guess, Los Angeles, they were called Black and Blue, and I was intrigued by his production style. And he said, I would be very much into doing your third album, but you have to come to Vancouver. And we were fine with that. We didn't have houses or wives or kids or anything else to do.
Much more unattached, right?
You couldn't even get there. It was like, you had to take a connecting flight to even get there. Back in the Stone Age, before there was internet or mobile phones or any of that
Fax
stuff.
machines.
So we went to this place called Vancouver. The magic of that studio was, as Tico said, the loading bay and that old Neve board. And then what happened was all of us came together. Remember Bob Rock, who went on to make so many great records, like with Metallica or Motley Crue,
And produced a record for
and
you
he
later.
did keep the faith. He was just a staff engineer. He made $15,000 doing that record. Fairbairn was a trumpet player in a band called Prism. He wasn't Bruce Fairbairn yet. He hadn't done Aerosmith or Van Halen or AC/DC or any of the bands that followed us up to Vancouver as a result of Slippery. So what happened was magic for all of us, everybody involved in that record. Desmond had never had a hit song before.
Wow, right.
He had
Before he
written
worked
one
with you,
song
yeah.
with Kiss that was a disco song. All of us came together, and somehow this incredible magic happened.
Yeah, it was one of those times when all the planets and the moons lined up, and we were all, just there for one purpose. It was make that record. In Vancouver was, they had Expo was like a big thing.
It was sort of the birth of Vancouver in a weird way. They brought the World Expo
Oh,
there.
right.
That's when, it seemed like everybody found out about this wonderful place called Vancouver. Before then, like I said, it was, you couldn't get there from here.
And I remember we were in that, they put us in this condo, like in an over 55 place, I think they put this in. Boy, that was a mistake.
We got
We were
thrown
evicted
out.
out of there. We
Were
said
you
the-
actually evicted
Yeah,
out of
the
it?
cops
Oh.
came and we said, we're not ready to go. They said, we didn't ask you if you're ready. There you go.
Yeah, so it really was a magical time. And then, subsequently so many other bands went there to capture that sound. And we went many, many years later, and, it's not there. Sometimes history moves on, and that became a rehearsal studio, and they gutted it, and they sold the gear out. And it was heartbreaking,
Yeah.
because a lot of these big studios eventually go under, and that was one of them, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there is something about that magic, right, of having the right people in the right place that sort of lets that creativity out at the right time. David, based on your story about getting evicted and that, like, you guys, what was it like now? The first two albums, are great records, and then Slippery When Wet explodes. I mean, I'm one of those kids who was watching you guys on MTV. I'm 16 years old seeing Bon Jovi and just saying, this band is unbelievable, and went out and bought the album. And between the MTV videos that were hitting and then going out and just being relentless on touring, that must have been a wild time too, thinking about the connection and the magic, because that had to be different for you than anything that had come before, right?
The first two records were somewhat successful. You'd come to a city like Cleveland, and I'll give you a great example. Kid Leo was the DJ. He was the king of
great
radio.
Kid Leo.
And we did one of those lunchtime concerts. And then, and then you'd go out to lunch with Leo, and you'd either get the blessing or not, and Tico and I went out to lunch with Leo because he liked guys from Jersey. And we played one of those lunchtime shows. And then
What did he say to you at the lunch? Do you remember?
Oh, no. I mean, that was 40 years ago. But, I know a friendship began there. So the point I'm making is that you could get support regionally or locally. Going out with Donnie Iris and doing shows, or,
Right.
when there were bands like the Michael Stanley Band who broke out.
Cleveland, Pittsburgh, right?
Right? And so we came up in that period in time. So the first two records, that worked for us. And we were building a nice little, following, and had a couple gold albums. MTV benefited us. It's 1986. We're young. We fit that demographic. By then, we also figured out, don't let record companies convince you how to make a video, because we fell for that a bunch. And we had built a reputation as a pretty good live band. And so by the third album, we said, just capture what we do
Yeah.
for TV. And we then, again, like that Bruce Fairbairn magic period, we found a guy named Wayne Isham who started making those kind of videos and capturing what it was like to be on the stage with us. And then Bad Name is that, Prayer is that, Wanted is that, Bad Medicine is that, I'll Be There For You is that. porn. In fact, they're all performance
Yeah,
videos.
they are, right? Yeah.
Because we just kept reiterating, we're a really good live band.
Yeah.
No movies. You know,
Right.
no,
No.
storylines of other actors.
No more
You know,
plots
if you
based
ever
on
want to war to
Firestarter or
torture
something.
us, show Runaway. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be hell if we were just sitting here watching Runaway over
And
That's
now,
not
ladies and
fair.
gentlemen, let's open the screen
Right,
and
if we
show.
would have went up, if I'd seen that on the 6th floor, I might have asked for an edit.
like cut.
Yeah.
Well, again, from the fans' point of view, I think those videos capturing you guys live absolutely drew all of us in because I was like, "Fuck, I gotta go see these guys live," right?
And then, you know, and then we could deliver on the promise.
Yeah.
So many of those things were built upon what do we do? We're a really good live band. Come and see it.
Yeah. So what is that like when you're finally on the road and you're not opening for people anymore? You are the headliner. Is that exciting to have that kind of pressure to say now we gotta deliver what we promised, or what does that feel like up there?
I don't think it's pressure. I think we were 24 years old and
You're
ready
ready.
to do it. And we love to play and we love to get out there and kick ass. And for us, it was like, now here's your opportunity. It was just go and walk
And you're
on that
3
stage.
records deep and years in the bars before that.
Yeah.
So it's not like we didn't know how to do it. We weren't thrust into a situation we weren't familiar with.
I often talk about that. I think a lot of younger bands today don't have that sort of, period of playing the bars as much as they used to. And
There's not that many bars anymore.
Right,
I mean,
right.
Plus,
we
the
just came from-
drinking age was 18.
Right.
Very important, and it sounds goofy, but you could sneak in at 16 and 17.
Not that any of us did that.
But all of that was integral. It was integral to the story. And then being an opening act and having to win the hearts and minds of the audience that was there to see someone else, doing it in a performance space this big while the headliner's gear was behind that curtain.
Right.
How do you do it?
Curtain
with no
covering up their
room?
drum, right?
Yeah, we're from Jersey. We want to kick everybody's ass. We just say,
Southside Johnny used to call it head hunting.
Yeah.
It was. You had to go and win the hearts and minds of all these people on a nightly basis, in 8 feet, and stuff like that. So you learn to be an entertainer.
I mean, just even since you mentioned it too, jumping back to that period in Jersey and with Southside and Bruce, I mean, man, you guys were all tearing it up. That I was not in that scene. I never got to see any of those shows there, but man, that must have been amazing one night after the other. And even with Atlantic City Expressway, and you guys are just, bringing it every single night in every club and earning it, right?
Well, that's how you had to do it. And the good thing about the success of course, Bruce and then Southside after that was that original music was encouraged down the shore in New Jersey. So there were bars that you could go and cut your teeth writing your own songs. And by the time I was 18, that's all I was doing.
Yeah, right. Which isn't always usual, right? A lot of times people expect
Well,
cover bands
it's
or
very easy to get into a cover band and make money.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, but that's a different path.
Let's talk a little bit about, we kind of touched on a little bit, arrangements for the band, right? Because that's the other thing about the sound of Bon Jovi to me is that you guys do always sound larger than life on the record, on stage, and there's something unique about the sound of Bon Jovi that you capture from, the drums. And David, you and I were talking earlier, I said as a keyboard player myself, I loved the fact that Bon Jovi really had keyboards up front. That was an important part
Me
of the
too.
band. Right, John? Because a lot of bands you're expecting
about
at
the
that
keyboards,
time.
that's
All about the keyboards. All about the
You're between 2 keyboard players. It's rough, I know. But there was something about you guys that stood out too. I think that arrangement that the band had, and we can even talk about the arrangement today. There's so much that each of you bring to the sound of a Bon Jovi song and a record, and even taking those songs from 40 years ago and making them fresh today and feeling right for this band. You guys want to talk a little bit about sort of that idea of how you all work together on the musical side, from the musicianship side?
John talked to it. He's done
Yeah.
9 albums now
Yeah.
together, John.
It started as a producer for Bon Jovi, which we were talking about earlier, right?
Started as the producer on Have a Nice Day, and that was the first song we wrote
Amazing song.
collectively with Richie. And but you were talking about the past. I was a fan. So when we had the opportunity to write, I was so excited to try and write a classic Bon Jovi song. And but in the studio, Antico and I were talking about this today, where we sit in a circle, And whether, even in rehearsals, we do the same thing. We're kind of all in a small circle, and depending on what we're working up, then that translates to the studio as well. And there's a pattern we all seem to live by. I kind of sit off of Tico's hi-hat, and then there's Huey and John, and Lemma's over here, and Phil and Everett, and so yeah, and it's the process of going from pre-production to recording, and we've had the experience of working at John's studio in Jersey, and that's where Have a Nice Day was done, and obviously Avatar, or the Power Station in New York, and then this last 2 albums were at Ocean Way in Nashville. But we collectively have a sound that we bring, which is comforting to me, is that wherever we go, we have this connectivity and a sound and a power that comes from all of us. But it starts with a song, obviously. So that's always the most important thing. So.
Yeah, and I think also a part of it too is that we're a band that we all sing. So it's not just it's John, and then there's a wall of background vocals and a wall of vocals there. So I think that also separates us from a lot of other bands.
Yeah, and that sort of vocal harmony sound has been there from the beginning too, right? I mean, that's something that, John, your voice is out front, but man, the band really builds that lush harmony that I think separates you from a lot of other bands that you kind of came out with too.
Yeah, we always change the set every night. John changes the set every night. He gives it to us about 15 minutes before a show.
Is that true?
That's
Is it
true.
late in
That's
the game?
true.
Yeah.
And that keeps it fresh for fans that come several nights.
Yeah, right.
Keeps it
And
fresh
for us.
And for us. And he'll call out a song out of left field. And I got to say, these are the best musicians in the world right here.
Yes.
Because wherever he takes us, we go. And that's what makes the shows so much fun and so exciting, because you never know what's going to happen.
It was the one time you were on stage and you started, I think it was I Believe, in front of like 80,000 people. Didn't tell us. And I remember Phil, right, you were looking at me, he goes, I never heard that song. He's like, I need help. And I'm like, it's D, then we go to G. And I was like, and you look and you go, it's.
Don't be a baby.
Yeah. That's the thing, it's thrilling, because you go in and go, oh, well, here we go. He's running off the cliff, we're there.
But I just want to say one thing, where at times we have, in the writing process, worked up some demos, but it doesn't sound like Bon Jovi until Huey and Tico do their thing. It's, for me, there was that magic, obviously, John's timbre and his tone and the lyrics and the melodies, but there's something about the rhythm section that is such the foundation of any record you're working on. And I call it the Tico de Gallo. It's his style of playing is so unique, because any other drummer at some time, would approach it more as kind of, I don't want to say a bonehead rock, a more pedestrian in a certain way. Where Tico brings such a fire and polyrhythms.
It's his Latin.
Yeah, the Latin, Cuban. The what?
It's the grease.
It's the grease.
Cuban
the
grease,
mojo.
baby.
So, when these two are locked, it's such, and then, everyone else falls in, and it's just, but you have to build a house off of something, and no finer foundation than these two gentlemen.
It's a lot of garlic.
Tico, I was even listening to the new album, this week, and just thinking about your drumming too. I mean, your style is incredible, and even thinking back to that, there's sometimes you're doing fills, and I notice you always you'll land it on the one sometimes even, which is hard for a drummer, right? Because the better thing is the do-do-do-do-do, and then wait for the downbeat. Yeah. But man, you're right into it, which is, you got to have that perfect, or you're going to miss the downbeat.
Yeah, I have no idea how I do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
I really don't. It's to me, it's complimenting the song, and when the chorus is to build it as big as possible, bring it down when you need the innuendo to tell a story. By the way, I'm not much of a lyric listener, and this album, I had to tell John, I called him especially, I go, dude, amazing lyrics. So now I'm not only playing to the melody, but I'm playing to the lyrics on this record.
Oh yeah, Does that change the way you're thinking about it then? That if you're listening, right? And
No, it makes
what
me
that-
enjoy it more. But
Yeah?
to me, it's melody and
And now you can go back and listen to all the other lyrics.
What is your name?
I want to think a little bit too now about this idea of where we're at, this sort of legacy of the band, John, right? And all of these things we've been talking about. 40 years of making music. The first album comes out in '84, and here we are now in 2024, which for a lot of us seems like a number that shouldn't be a year, but here we are, right? I got a chance to watch the entire Hulu documentary, which is fantastic if anybody's seen it. And I'll admit to you, John, the first thing I thought, I wanted to just walk up to you and say, "Are you okay, man?" I just wanted you to be okay by the end of that. And I think that's because that story it told was an emotional one, and it draws us in, and we, for those of us who've been fans for so long, we just think about, the music and what it's meant. Mm-hmm. So there was a phrase that came up a couple times in the documentary of you guys, and it might apply to all of you, kind of trying to find the joy in the music too. So I wanted to ask you about that, looking back and all these years. Is that something that's on your mind? Are you actively still saying, yeah, this has got to be joyful. This has to be something I want to keep doing and I get a connection?
Making records is an incredible privilege, and it's always been a joyful process. But in light of my surgery, which I never had anticipated anything like this, which, by the way, everything in that film was shot 1 and 2 years ago, so I'm well on the road to recovery. But thanks, yeah. I didn't anticipate anything like that, obviously. But 2020, which I still think is an incredible album, we released in the midst of COVID while all of us were home and in lockdown. So obviously not a joyful record. I still think an important record because it marks a moment in time and they're topical songs.
Yeah.
This House Is Not For Sale was a great band album, but it was a statement record. And we wanted very much to make a statement with that record. So as much as we bonded over it, and it was a #1 album, of course, and then we came here and got inducted, and so all of the memories of that are incredible. But not a joyful record, a statement record. And so coming through the surgery, all of us being let out of COVID exile and back into the wild, as it were, this record comes together, and it's a joyous moment in time. And it's our 40th, so there was all these opportunities to look back while looking ahead, and it gave you, although you were full of emotion, it was joyous.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned 2020. I mean, again, it's kind of weird to put a record out and then just, like you said, kind of be in lockdown. Where does it go, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you that song, American Reckoning, is fantastic.
Thank you.
And I think that song connected with so many people from what we all were going through, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a topical record, and I just had to take the role as narrator. And you're writing American Reckoning and do what you can in songs that are just moments in time. And I'm very proud of all the songwriting on the record.
The other thing that was interesting in the Hulu doc was seeing you down in the basement with all the cassette tapes and the videotapes. And as a person who works at a museum and a historian of music, I was like, ooh, how do I get there? Like, I want to just sit at that tape machine and listen to some of those, what was that like going through that history and hopefully preserving it and, what will happen?
Well, yeah, it started with the archiving. So in year 38, I was very conscious that the 40th was around the corner. And I had been a hoarder. I didn't realize to what degree.
A lot of it's up in the exhibit we'll talk about in a minute,
some of the great
right?
stuff is up there. But there's so much, and I was aware, but not to the extent. And so I started this concept of archiving, and there is now a company that does band archiving.
Right, professional
out of
archiving,
Boston.
yeah.
But they were really brand new 2+ years ago, and had started working with other bands, blah, blah, blah. Long story short is they weren't up and running yet. So I started thinking of the archiving that went hand in hand with what became the documentary, and it gave everybody access to all of this stuff. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, I did keep it all because I didn't know what it was going to mean. And now, it's incredible that as we're talking about the year 2024, I never looked that far in the future as a kid.
Right.
I don't know whoever could have. I remember thinking as far ahead as the year 2000 because it sounded like a science fiction movie.
Totally.
And I was thinking, I'll be 38, maybe I'll be married, maybe I'll have a career, I don't know. Who could have thought about 2024, and that there would be things like a rock and roll museum that, is going to keep these artifacts. So we have it all, and it's fun to see.
Yeah, it's amazing too to think about some of those songs you maybe didn't release or how many.
Oh, yeah, so that's the
things you worked
point,
on
is
and
that there's
demoed,
so
right?
many.
Yeah.
Whatever album it was, it always took 30 songs to get the 10 or 12. You can't write just 12. So you're writing 30 to get to the 12. So the rest of them were on cassettes or, in the notebooks and, in a variety of different ways to hear them again. So yeah, all those songs will come out in the short term. Sometime now that this is behind us. Now we've had release day.
Yeah. Well, that will be exciting.
It's
I know
cool.
we're gonna
There's
wait
a
for
lot
that.
of it.
Yeah.
A lot.
Do those 30 songs make it into the room ever, like with everybody? Like, is it?
No,
you
we
guys all
demo
get
them.
to? Yeah.
We demo them.
The band, the full band.
Yeah. All these things are, not all, but
Yeah,
I
but
would
a
say
lot.
85% are worked up in some way, shape, and form.
Yeah.
But I remember when we were doing Have a Nice Day, and we were at a certain point in the record, and we were kind of winding down the recording process, and I said to John, I go, play me everything you haven't played me. I know you have a shoebox. I know there's DATs. Remember DATs?
Yeah,
And cassettes and CDs in the house, and I call it smash or trash. So I said, I'm gonna be like an annoying A&R guy. I'm just gonna go through these songs really quickly, and in that beautiful collection of songs was Who Says You Can't Go Home?
Oh wow.
And we worked it up that day, and
Number one song.
number one song,
Do you remember where that
Grammy-winning
originally-
song.
Where
Not
that
trash.
originally was in the process of writing? Like, how long had you been sitting on that?
No. For that record.
Just for the stuff you had for that record.
Yeah. Richie and I wrote that together. And yeah, I mean, it was just one of the many. Always was one of those. I'd recorded it for a movie called Romeo is Bleeding. Bob Rock produced it. He was our opening act. We would use him, in the afternoons to do demos. After Keep the Faith between there and these days. And then the song was on a DAT on a shelf in my studio, and the famous A&R guy, John Kolodner, he did the same thing. He goes, "What do you got up here?" And he started pulling. He goes, "That's a smash." And I go, "Oh, okay." So the band did it. Of course, it's one of our biggest singles ever. So always was a monster. There's a treasure trove of shit. Come on over. Come on to the house. That was holy water. You're all being
Oh, there you go.
We're in the Hall of Fame.
John, were you going to add something to that too?
Well, if you listen to the demo of Who Says You Can't Come, it's literally what's so great about it. It's organic. It's John and Richie. It almost sounded like they were in a locker room on acoustic guitars. So it's literally just two guys, acoustic guitar, great song. It wasn't a produced demo. It was very stripped down, but you could tell right away that the song
was there.
Had depth and teeth. That's what we call it. So.
Well, I think all of you guys were here and on stage in 2018 when we inducted Bon Jovi into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That was a very special night. I'm so glad that on our year, the induction was in Cleveland.
Yeah.
I really am.
Right up the hill over here.
Yeah, I really, really liked that our year was here. And it was really special because everyone and anyone that came in for it, they had to come. Like if you were in New York, you could go, yeah, I'm going to go to the induction, and then I'm going to go to
I'll
the
hop off
movies.
the R train or something, right?
And here, everybody that came for the couple of days, and it was really special. And there's a great story about Howard Stern. So Howard inducted us, of course, because we came up with Howard, and Tico and David especially know, in 1985 when we first met, he wasn't yet, that guy. And so we came up together when he was playing in like dinner clubs on Saturday to make money. I mean, for real, him and Robin would go to Club Benet in South Amboy, New Jersey, you know, and they'd serve you a chicken dinner, and he would tell jokes and talk about, you know, I'm on the radio, you know. That's how long we've known Howard. So I wanted him to induct us for that reason. And I went to convince him, and long story short is, he says, I don't know what you want, but if you want to see me, you got to meet me in my car. So this was like a mob hit, you know? I get out of my car with a driver. He's got his driver. I say to his driver, get out of the car. I get in the back seat of the car. He comes out of this, you know, meeting. He sits in the back seat. He goes, what is it? What is it? And I says, I want you to induct me in the Hall of Fame. So he gets very emotional. I get emotional. He says, you know, I've been asked so many times by different people, but for you, I will do it. And I got out of the car, and we closed the door and drove away. Then I called my manager. I go, well, it was easy. Of course he said yes. He goes, did you tell him it's in Cleveland?
He actually says that at the
All the time.
beginning of
It's
his
true.
speech, that you were the only one who could get him out to Cleveland.
There's
he
no
said.
doubt. He thought he had to bring his passport to come to Cleveland. But I'm so happy. And I know that other artists may not know or agree with that sentiment, because you think, oh, I want to do it in L.A., I want to do it in New York. No, I wanted to do it in Cleveland.
Yeah. We should talk to that night. Alec was, of course, on stage with you guys. Yeah. And that was an incredible moment to see. And to see him back with you. And, you know, I know you had a good time. Both of you kind of were playing together up there, right?
It was the high point. Other than getting inducted, reconnecting with Al meant everything to me.
He's a great guy.
It was very special.
He's a great guy.
You guys had your families in. In fact, John, if you don't mind me telling them, a couple of us got to tour you and your family around that night, and a bunch of you guys before the induction, just here in the museum. And I thought that was great too, because it was a moment to just kind of take in the history and the music of it all and your place in it, rather than the ceremony. And that was special being here in the museum that night.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I mean, the whole weekend to us was incredible. Absolutely. I mean, and the people that are, you know, dear friends that all came in, and of course Richie Sambora came in, and his mother and his daughter, and you know, so all of us, and Alec being here, it was wonderful.
Yeah, and I think Richie and Alec, everybody was on stage. I mean, that must have been a great moment to past, present, you know, future, the whole kind of connection to the band. It was special, I think, for a lot of the fans to see all of you be able to do that, because some bands don't, right? Some bands won't kind of reunite and bring everybody
that
up.
year, you know, look, Dire Straits, who I would have loved
Right.
to have been here, weren't here. Or that's the last time the Cars got to do anything.
Yeah, very last time
You know?
Rick took the stage with them, in fact. Yeah,
that was great.
Yeah. David, that must have been a cool moment for you, too, with the kind of keyboard history
Keyboards,
of the
fuck y'all with
Come
the
on,
keyboard
man,
shit.
John. You know, you got to give us a
Fuck y'all
little
with the
bit,
keyboard
right?
shit.
You're surrounded. Yes, the cars and the keyboards.
Yeah, that's right.
No,
All right.
that was great.
Right, yeah, very cool. It was a great night, you know, and you guys actually, right, one floor down from us, came and did the dedication of the official plaque for that year, along with the Moody Blues, another incredible
They
band.
were awesome. It was great. It was great. Every bit of it.
Well, how about we'll talk a little John and Phil, thinking about that role. We'll get off the keyboard so John can relax. And let's talk about
Thank
guitars, because
God.
that's the guitar sound is so important. What's it been like for you guys? Because you really have created a new, complete kind of partnership on stage of making that guitar sound of Bon Jovi come alive. It's really impressive watching the two of you play.
Yeah, for me, it was, when I came in, it was more about establishing a version of what was there that respected the band, the songs, and the fans, and Richie, of course. And then it grew into me and John just delivering the goods every night, just guitar on the left, guitar on the right, and we feel different and we sound different. And the energy was always palpable, so it was an exciting time. And then when we started recording, that was something else. That was like, you know, it's funny, somebody told me the other day that they loved the solo to The People's House.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have to listen to it, because I don't remember. Because when you're in the moment, you let that moment be that moment in that present time, and then the next moment is the next song. So listening to that solo again was like, wow! It all came back to me. It was amazing, and the energy and even the vibrato I used and the notes I chose, and it was just really exciting. You know, and when we're all like, hey, do that thing at the end. You know that thing that you can do that thing? Do that thing at the end. And then I did that thing, and and I heard it today, and it was like, that's that thing. So it was like that. But I mean, it's so many moments like that, working with these guys. It's just fabulous.
You had a great line at one point I saw in an interview where you said, when you first joined, you had to almost go back and play what Richie had played on the records, because that's what people expected, right? Even if Richie had more room to kind of wander.
Oh, yeah. He could stray.
Yeah.
But if I strayed, I sucked.
Right. Then it was like, oh, Phil's not playing it right.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Have you found that space now in your playing? Do you feel like you've got the Phil X space to wander?
I mean, no,
John's
when you can't, you
nodding
still
yes.
can't stray. You can't play any different notes.
Living
on
on
the
a
solo.
prayer, you got to play the way.
Yeah,
they
you got to
expect
play
it,
that.
right?
Those are the melodies. Everybody expects that every night. I would expect that every night. So that's what I put out there. But I can stretch a little. One of our perfect band example of stretching is we all go crazy at the end of Keep the Faith every night.
Yeah.
And we all enjoy it and put it out there. And I'm seriously winded. It's like, hey, we're doing Amen after. I'm like, hold it. I got to catch my breath, man. And then they hand me an acoustic. And I'm like, wait, what's that? It happened night after night. Now you get used to it eventually, but it takes a little acclimating.
Everett, I think your addition of percussion, playing along with Tico, and your voice, again, think about that harmony of the band. Man, it's been really special hearing what you've been able to bring to the sound and expand it in new ways, too.
Thank you. I came into the fold in 2016, and honestly, I was really nervous because this band was already badass,
Yeah,
so I just didn't know how I would fit in vocally or with the percussion, because Tico has always played percussion on the other record, so I was nervous about that too. So to spend this time with them and have to be able to record with them on this last endeavor has been an amazing experience. And to actually listen back to these recordings and hear me in there, I'm like, ooh, I'm in Bon Jovi now.
I'll double down on that, man. You can hear it on the new record. Like I was listening to it, I was like, oh man, I could hear those two layers of percussion going on in the record now that take it a little somewhere different.
Yeah, and in the vocal blends.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
Yeah, love the singer.
This was very much a band record.
Yeah.
Right up until the very end. When Phil's last solo on Living Proof was a great example. That solo, it either wasn't there, Philly, but I remember it was the last day. And was it the initial conversation on that day was to top what was there? Yeah. Yes. And so he came in and he said, let me take the track home. I'm going to work a couple things up. And he came back and he blew through something that was classic and sounded fantastic. And then he says, I got this other kooky idea. And he took a bouzouki tuning, put the B string in the same nut, right?
E.
Yeah. And
each
tuned the
string
two
seems to
strings
be-
in the same nut to one.
Oh, wow.
And then he did that, and I went, that is just so cutting edge. And then that was the very last thing we did on the record, which then we, as the producers, went, this record's finished, just stop, because it was such a creative, it was just great. It was great.
That was an amazing moment for
It
me.
really
Yeah.
was.
I mean, in the demo, to show you guys the process, like what John was just saying, Phil had done a solo, and it was great. And then Phil, being who he is, was said, and John said, let's see if we can dig a little deeper, explore some other stuff. And, Phil went off and did some homework and came in. It was like, okay, I got 3 ideas.
Right.
And he played them all.
Right.
And, 2 was really good. 3rd is, number 3 is the one that's on the record, and that's when we were like, just walk away.
Right, you got to know when you found the
I
right thing.
Can I just say one more thing about Phil was talking about the tones? You know, I think, you know, in a band that we're fans of the history and the legacy, you have to be conscious of where these guys came from and have your eye on the future. And that also goes down to guitar tones and playing and style. And so even on stage, we are very conscious of our tones being complementary of each other.
Right.
And because if we both are shooting in the same airspace, it won't translate. So harmonically, sonically, so we really go deep into the exploration of tone. And it's exciting, but that's our job, and we love it, you know. And I think the last thing is that what Phil talked about is, in a situation like this, to honor the band and honor the songs, you better learn the solos note for note. I mean, I used to play with Rod Stewart, and I had to learn the solos note for note because you're fans of Ronnie Wood and Jeff Beck. And so as a fan of Richie's, and, you know, it's the right thing to do, you know, as an homage to where the history of the band. So, but we take it very seriously, you know.
And the fans sing along with the guitar solo, right?
Absolutely. So do we.
Right.
We care.
One of the things that I heard listening to the new album Bon Jovi Forever is it seemed to me there's so much fresh songwriting in here and going in different directions, but it felt to me like there were bits and pieces of the history of Bon Jovi hidden in there. There was, you know, the kind of talk box stuff on Living Proof, right? There's the certain keyboard sounds that take me back to some of the piano from earlier records. There's harmony stuff. There's even tone, like you were talking about, John, right? Yeah. And it felt like as a fan, you're listening to this record thinking, ooh, that's familiar. That sounds like Bon Jovi. It's reminding me of something, but it's new. It's in a new context. Was that something you thought about in the process?
But what happens is while I'm archiving and marking the
process.
40th, this is your reality. So this is where what you're writing about.
Yeah.
So like I'd said, when you're writing 2020, you're the narrator in a topical record. Now you're archiving and you're coming up on this 40th, so that's what's on your mind.
Yeah.
And so, you know, things like the talk box are truly identified with us, and we absolutely continue to always give credit to Peter Frampton and Joe Walsh, where we commandeered it from back in, you know, from the latter 70s.
Yeah.
But since the mid 80s, that instrument is identified with us because Living on a Prayer, and then in 2000, It's My Life. So bringing it up on a riff song like Living Proof made perfect sense because it's in a weird way, it's part of our sound and has been for such a long time. But like I said, the lyrical content and the songwriting, this is where I'm at, right?
Yeah. I think, too, I have to just ask a music nerd question, if I may. Because on the end of Seeds...
Easy.
Wait, David, did he just make the joke back to us? I think he did. On the end of Seeds,
Yeah.
that's the Beatles, right?
Yes.
I
Most
mean,
definitely.
yeah, I mean...
I knew it from the second. Yes, absolutely.
How did that come about? Was that...
We were right from pre-production, right from
Really?
the demo, from everything. I just was like, John, we need to hire Dave Campbell, who we've used repeatedly, you know, over the years. I want exactly this from the Beatles. I know why. You know, I mean, yes, that much was a nod to the great George Martin.
Yeah.
And we hit the chord.
And that's why we did it. I mean, it's supposed to be evident.
It was so perfect that, because I only heard it on digital originally from, you know, the copy I had, and I thought, is this the end of a side, and does it go into the runoff of the LP and loop the way the Beatles did it? I mean,
No,
it's,
just the chord at the end.
yeah, that emotion.
You know, but the string arrangement and that, then just the way that the drum approach, you know,
Totally.
and everything, you know.
Yeah,
We knew that from inception what it was going to be.
amazing. And then there's some, you know, stuff on here I think that even connects to a little bit of the country music you've been doing, and maybe, I don't know, John, feels like a little Nashville kind of crept into this record too.
Yeah, we've known Nashville for so long, hence the bar. I've been going to Nashville for 35, 38 years.
Yeah.
You know, I've known so much of Nashville. We recorded 3 albums there. We've done Always was done there. Someday I'll Be Saturday Night was done there. I've been going there since Billy moved there in 1991 when I first found him again, and was making Pretty Blue World for him with him. So I've always loved the scene down there. I always jokingly say these are my people, because if you think of Hollywood like it's a room full of actors, Nashville is full of songwriters and musicians and people in our industry. Every kid on every street corner is an amazing player.
Totally.
Or a storyteller or a singer or something. So I love it.
Yeah. Did you write Kiss the Bride to make every father in the world just cry endlessly for the future? And how many weddings do you think it will be played at?
Let's just put it this way. When I played that for Ed Sheeran, he was like, touche, motherfucker.
That's a good one.
He came over to my house last summer. I played it for Ed, and he was like, man. He goes, I didn't think of that. I go, well, fortunately, I did. But, being blessed with, kids of this age, when I'd written, I got the girl for my daughter. She was the first baby in the band. And so it was all of our first baby because, now I write I Got the Girl. The Queen of Hearts will always be a 5-year-old princess to me. Well, she's 31, and she's engaged to be married. So you write this song. And it's just part of the evolution.
Yeah. Beautiful song, by the way.
Thank you.
Beautiful melody, great lyrics. Yeah. Well, I want to end up just talking with you guys about being here today. Thank you again so much. And before we came in here, got to go up to the exhibit, Bon Jovi Forever. And a bunch of the folks in here, they all got to see it, a lot of them earlier today, too. I think the curators did a great job.
Me too.
Right? I mean, amazing the way they were able to tell that
Thank
story.
you to them. Yes.
Yeah. Shelby and Andy and the whole team.
Thank you.
And luckily enough, again, coming back to that archive idea, you guys had so much that we could pull from. Everybody's represented up there on some level, I think, in the exhibit.
Yes.
What did you guys think going up and seeing a room full of the history of Bon Jovi?
I didn't see a keyboard up there.
Yes, you did.
It was on the floor.
In the corner.
Easy.
It's a very small keyboard.
Sadly
There's a
enough,
keyboard there.
David and I talked about his motif, Yamaha motif. That's up there. It's a pretty cool
Yeah,
instrument.
that was on stage for a bunch of tours.
I did see you hand him $20 today.
Now I know why.
Keep it fair. Keep it fair.
No, it's incredible. Again, the staff here did an amazing job, and the motorcycle and all of the stuff dating back to the notebooks and the clothes and the instruments and the photographs and everything that's all a part of this archive.
That's awesome.
It's beyond our wildest dreams because, this is what you'd hoped it would be someday. And so that's, when you get inducted and you get to come here on that day, they have a little teeny display window of your stuff. And then it goes into circulation. So then it might not be there if you were to have come back in a year from now and you go, wait a minute, am I not in the Hall of Fame anymore? But there's just so much from so many artists that they have to rotate it constantly. So then when you get the one opportunity that not everybody gets, right, to have this huge display, like it happened to be our 40th, and then the hall said yes. But to have this opportunity is a blessing and a gift, and we're grateful for it. That's why we came to see you today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know for me, that section of, I love seeing handwritten lyrics and, the way things are crossed out and it's like, fuck, that's a good idea. Like, cross out that one and write that other word, right? And on that one wall, it's every song from Slippery and Wet, taking us all back. But then there's lyrics from throughout the history up on the wall. That must have been cool, John, as a songwriter, just kind of see all of those.
It is.
It's for
It's
you, they're
amazing.
notebooks, right? And for us
Yeah.
now, they're artifacts.
No, to find the original lyrics of Runaway and, and all the way to Slippery and then to current day. I do make a point of keeping all those lyrics and keeping all those scraps of paper and putting them all together and then putting in an envelope every album as it's done and then having stuck every book in a box. Because they were important to me. I didn't know that, eventually they'd be archived and in a museum, but they were important to me. So I've always made sure that I kept them.
Yeah. Anything else that you guys saw up there? Anything that kind of connected with you or something you saw that you had forgotten about up in the exhibit?
I love the video of
Oh, yeah.
over the years, once the song morphing to different eras or different tours. I was transfixed by that.
Yeah, it's cool the way it even, again, what we were talking about today, it shows you the evolution of the sound of the band. That still sounds like Bon Jovi on this record, but also sounds different from Runaway, right? I mean, it's...
It better. I think that's for also, I think, you know, as we're all fans of our favorite band, and then you could always, no matter what your favorite band is, with maybe the exception of AC/DC, you'll say, there was this moment in time when they sounded like that, and that's my favorite period for that band. And I get that. AC/DC's, all their records are the best rock record. And it's the same record
all
for
the way
50
through,
years.
over and over.
Yeah.
If you can't, you know,
So right. Yeah.
they're the exception. But even the Beatles, you evolve, you change this sound. And it doesn't mean that you didn't like what you did before, but you don't want to be stale. You don't want to repeat yourself. You don't want to be chasing something that was successful. You need to evolve. You need, in our case, to make Lost Highway and go into Nashville. You need to write 2020 and be the narrator. You need to, you know, have had Slippery in your life just to be able to look back on that. But, you know, if Forever sounded like Slippery, that would have been a mistake.
Totally.
You know, that's a mistake. You need to evolve, and you need to grow with your audience. And like I said, some of y'all have been here for the whole ride. Some got on along the way, some got off along the way. But it's all a part of the big picture in this journey that we've been on. And it continues thanks to you.
Thank you.
Well, I think there's no better place to end it than that, John. That sounds great. We're going to ask the audience to stay in their seats so we can get the band out of here. But ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Bon Jovi.
Thank you.